Good afternoon. I hope everybody's having a good weekend and staying safe. Jimmy here in Chicago. It's Halloween weekend. A lot going on. Many options. Please, if you're going out, keep your head on a swivel. If you see something, say something. I want to take you back to 2009 to one of my favorite Chicago mob trials, and that was the Mike Sarno trial. When the indictment first came out, I really wasn't interested in going to this trial. I didn't know any of the defendants with the exception of Large, and I was just coming off the Family Secrets trial, and no other trial could ever compare to that. But I'm so glad that I went to the Large guy's trial. That turned out to be one of my favorites. Two of the defendants were out on bond, which is kind of rare in RICO cases like that. Usually these guys are all in custody, so you got a chance to make small talk with Large and the Polish guy, talk about sports, talk about the daily news, and they both seem like pretty nice guys. But the government alleged that the crew led by Mike Sarno was running a multi-million-dollar illegal gambling operation. They had a very sophisticated burglary crew. They would commit anywhere from 10 to 12 scores throughout the Midwest a year, generating just under $2 million for the crew. They were also involved in arson, stealing cars, intimidating witnesses. But the major charge was the bombing. The crew allegedly blew up a competitor, a video poker competitor company in Berwyn. The defendants were, according to the government, the boss of the crew, Mike, Large guy Sarno. Then the co-defendants were Mark Pulchman, high-ranking outlaw motorcycle gang member. Then you had the father and son combo, World War II veteran Samuel Volpendenzo and his son Anthony Volpendenzo, master thief. You had the Polish guy, or the guy I'll refer to as the Man in Black. You had a couple crooked cops and a couple lowlifes that were part of the crew that didn't want to go to jail, decided to flip, cooperate, and actually wear a wire. Here's Mike Sarno. Government alleged that he was boss of the Chicago outfit at the time and leader of the crew. Made member of the Chicago outfit. Grew up under the tutelage of Bobby Salerno. And back in 1990, Large got pinched on a major RICO case with 20 other outfit guys. That was Harry Ailman, Rocky and Felice, Mike Sarno, and several others. He kept his mouth shut, did his time like a man, did maybe 6.5 years, came home, and actually caught some lowlife sleeping at his fiance's apartment. Large gave this guy a tremendous beating that required numerous surgeries and major dental work. And this guy, I don't want to say his name, but this scumbag, he's so lucky Large didn't kill him. Any other outfit guy would have tortured him and killed him. But Large was a nice guy. He showed a little empathy for him. But Large pretty much spent half his life in and out of jail, never cooperated, never rolled. Fast forward, he gets picked up, 2008, gets pinched on this case. The government alleged that he was the leader of the crew and that he was the one that ordered the bombing of a rival of his in the video poker business. One of the government's star witnesses was this lowlife here, Vinnie Dublino. He owned a video poker vending machine business as well, and he was warned repeatedly to get his machines out of certain restaurants and bars that belonged to Large. He wouldn't listen. After numerous threats, this scumbag testified against Large that he admitted that he had some tax problems, admitted that he didn't want to go to jail, so he decided to flip and cooperate against Large and testify against his number one competitor. He said that one time, because they lived in the same neighborhood in Westchester, that Large warned him again. They got in a face-to-face confrontation. Large told him to knock off his bullshit, and he, quote, said to Large right to his face, F you, fat ass. I don't work for you. And that was it. That was the straw that broke the back. Shortly after that, Large and his crew decided to blow up Vincent Dublino's video poker company right there in Berwyn. Now, the government alleged that when little Jimmy Marcello and Mikey Marcello went away in the family secrets trial, that it was Large and Large's crew that took over the multi-million-dollar video poker vending business in pretty much any bar or restaurant in the city of Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. At one time, all their machines came from M&M Amusement, which was the Marcellos, and then eventually all the machines, probably some of them are still out there today, came from Large's crew. But this generated millions of dollars, not only for the crew, but for the rest of the outfit as well. I remember during the family secrets trial, when they played the videotapes of Mikey Marcello visiting his brother Jimmy Marcello in Milan, Michigan, they talked in code, and they were referring to Large as truck driver, referred to Large as fat boy, and Jimmy Marcello trusted that Large, if he took over the video poker business, he would do the right thing and take care of Jimmy Marcello's family while Jimmy was away. Government also charged that this crew was a very sophisticated burglary crew. They would pull off anywhere from 10 to 12 jewelry heist scores a year, not only in the city, suburbs, but the surrounding Midwest states like Missouri, Michigan, Iowa, where they felt it was a little easier to pull off a crime there. And their 10, 12 scores a year generated just under $2 million for the crew. And they also obviously went into how the crew would spend months and months casing the store, learning everything about the store owner, about the store employees. I mean, thorough planning before they would go in there and mostly smash and grabs. The crew would always threaten violence, but not one of them ever used violence. And the defense tried to bring that up during trial and also at sentencing, but it pretty much fell on deaf ears. But this crew was a very sophisticated jewelry heist crew. Then they would fence all their stolen gems and merchandise through Goldberg Jewelers. Here's Goldberg Jewelers. This was right there in Roosevelt and Cicero. You could drive by it all the time. Mark Polchman ran this operation. It was basically a front for the Outlaw motorcycle gang and the Chicago outfit. This is where they would fence all their stolen goods. But what Mark Polchman and Large did not know was that the FBI had this place under surveillance. They had it wired inside and wired it up outside. And unfortunately for Mike Sarno, it didn't look very good for Large because they showed several videotapes of Mike Sarno visiting Goldberg Jewelers, showing that he indeed knew Mark Polchman, that, there was definitely a relationship there between the outfit and the Outlaw motorcycle gang. Mark Polchman was getting tipped off by the police that, the feds were onto him, and he was on wire at Goldberg Jewelers saying, he's not selling any drugs. He's not hurting anybody. He's not selling any weapons. So in his mind, why would the FBI be interested in him? Just small-time scores that they were doing. But he really underestimated the FBI and had no idea how serious the investigation was. At one point, when Large walked in there, they showed it on video. Large had the hat on backwards, and Mark Polchman immediately handed him the Chicago Sun-Times, and on the front page was the picture of the store that got blown up in Berwyn. There really wasn't any dialogue between the two, but Large immediately took the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times and shredded it. So then the FBI later on, they actually went into the garbage and pieced together all the shredded newspaper to show that Large was very concerned about that bombing. Without saying anything, the government showed that here's Mark Polchman handing Large the Chicago Sun-Times story of the bombing, and the Large immediately shreds it. So, it just really didn't look too good for Mike Sarno or Mark Polchman. But this is a place, the This was kind of like the crew's headquarters, if you will. Also, one of the charges was right next door was a currency exchange, and Mark Polkman and Anthony Volpendenzo and Mark Hay, they blew a hole through the wall of the currency exchange and stole over $200,000. That's how brazen this crew was. Now, here was pretty much one of the main defendants, high-ranking outlaw motorcycle gang member Mark Polchman. If you saw this guy in court, you would never think he was an outlaw motorcycle guy. He wasn't real big, didn't have tattoos all over, was not intimidating at all, looked like a lawyer or a businessman. However, pretty much all the evidence was against him, and his lawyer, Damien Charles, really had his hands full. But this guy was basically the leader of the crew, if you will. He reported right to Mike Sarno, and he was also one of the best safe crackers around. A lot of Chicago outfit guys, associates, and other burglars would always bring him very difficult safes to peel and crack, and he was expert at peeling the safe. And then they testified that he would take a percentage of what was actually inside the safe. They went into, depending on what was in there, was cash, was it jewelry, and then he would get a small percentage for being able to crack the case. But Mark Polchman was a very cautious guy, very smart guy, but unfortunately, he befriended an FBI agent and had no idea that, how serious the investigation is. But Mark Polchman was allegedly the driver of the van when the crew that blew up the video poker business. There was a witness that seen him, but he was pretty much the main subject in this case. Now, to add to Vinnie Dublino's testimony, he testified that Mark Polchman and this man here walked into his bar one day and started threatening him over the machines, and they had an argument, and the bikers trashed the entire bar, destroyed everything, broke every piece of furniture, broke every glass, destroyed it biker style. And Vinnie Dublino testified against Mark Polchman, an outlaw motorcycle gang. But imagine this guy and Mark Polchman showing up at your company. I mean, these guys were pretty scary guys. They also showed the Outlaws motorcycles clubhouse, which is right near the Cook County Jail, 26 in California. But this was second in command, third in command of the Outlaw Motorcycle Gang, very close member of Mark Polchman, again, showing the outfit's relationship with the Outlaw Motorcycle Gang. And he was one of the men that went in there and destroyed Vinnie Dublino's, the government's main witness. He destroyed his bar, and he eventually died shortly after the trial. Now, here's my favorite defendant, one of my favorites of all time. This guy was 85 years old at the time, World War II Navy veteran, the Master Blaster, they called him, Sammy Volpendesto. This guy was a real character, man. He was in custody. And unlike most defendants, where, you could wear a suit and look more presentable to the jury, that kind of goes a long way, right? This guy did not give a fuck. He came out every day in the government-issued wheelchair and orange prison jumpsuit. He would laugh out loud, make wisecracks, fall asleep. They had him on tape talking about how he was bragging about the bomb that he made that the crew used in the Berwyn bombing. And he said that he put 2 wicks in it. And if you light both wicks, if the first wick is a dud, if it fizzles away, you're goddamn sure, and he pounded his fist on the table, that the second wick is going to ignite. He also told stories about Tony Accardo and Mad Sam DeStefano, which are unheard of. He talked about one day Mad Sam said to him, "Come here, Dago, you want to see something?" And he took him downstairs, and there was a guy being tortured by Mad Sam right there in his basement. He also talked about how Large's crew were a bunch of paupers and that Tony Accardo made millions, he said. He was talking shit about Large on tape while Large was 10 feet away in the courtroom staring at him. And there's nothing better to hear one mob guy talking shit about another mob guy on tape while they're both in the room together, right? Kind of like Sammy Gravano and John Gotti. But the Master Blaster, Sam, was complaining that he was doing all this work for the crew and he wasn't getting paid. He also said that the Northside crew wanted him, meaning DeFranzo's crew, because they knew he was no beefer. And somehow he ended up on Large's crew. But it was just interesting to hear this guy talk about Tony Accardo, Mad Sam DeStefano, and complaining about Large. And this was an old school Chicago outfit associate. Maybe even a made man, I don't know. But he was charged with making the bomb, giving it to the snitch, Mark Hay, who caught him on the wire talking about the bomb. And that bomb was used to blow up Vincent Dublino's video poker company in Berwyn. This is the Master Blaster, World War II Navy war hero. And then again, father and son on trial in the same courtroom. His son, Anthony Volpendenzo. This guy was a master thief. He was pretty much the leader of the burglary crew, if you would. After months of very careful planning and attacking, he would always threaten violence but never use violence. But this guy was also a championship BMX bike rider. And so, on some scores, what he would do is after casing the place, he would go to the bank or the jewelry store, park his bike, walk in, smash and grab the jewels, and then leave and use his bike as his getaway to get away. And one old lady that testified in court, she said after she broke free from the duct tape, when she tried to chase after him, she saw him ride away on his bike, and she said that she'd never seen anybody ride a bike like that, because this guy was, making all these maneuvers on the bike, getting away. But I'll also never forget the Sarno trial was during the winter, so right around Christmas time, and a couple days a week before court would start, you would hear somebody singing beautiful Christmas carols like Jingle Bells, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Silent Night. And it was really nice singing, right? It turned out that it was actually this guy here, one of the defendants in custody, Anthony Volpendenzo, master thief. He was actually singing. And normally the judge and the federal marshals would never allow any bullshit like that, especially in a federal courtroom. But the guy sang those songs so wonderful, so nicely that they actually allowed it. But it was just funny hearing him in the area where they keep the prisoners before they enter the courtroom singing Christmas carols. I'll never forget it. Now here's another defendant. We'll call him the man in black, or the Polish guy. He was out on custody. So he was come to court every day with a cane, always dressed in black, looking pretty sharp. He would be either with his daughter, his wife, his family. And the government alleged that he was the guy that made all the routes. He had a route, so he would go to all the bars and restaurants in the city of Chicago and the suburbs and service the machines, pay out the owner, do the collections. And he would drive around this really nice Hummer. Back then, Hummer was like the elite car back in the day, back at that time. And they interviewed all these bar and restaurant owners, and they asked him, did he ever threaten you? Did he ever show any violence? Did he ever try to extort you? And every single bar restaurant owner said, no, he didn't threaten them. He was a perfect gentleman. He was professional. He came in, he serviced the machines, he paid me, he took his end, never no problems. And till this day, I still don't know what this guy did wrong, aside from maybe not paying his taxes. But they also show how the government is and how the judge will allow certain things. And they showed certain photos of him socializing with the Carusos, which, I don't know if that looked bad or not, but he's actually related to the Carusos because his daughter is married to a Caruso. But they really tried to stick it to this guy. But again, In my mind, he did absolutely nothing. He was just going there, servicing the machines, no threatening, no violence, nothing like the old days. But I remember I actually became friends with him after the trial, after he came home from jail. And I never brought up the fact that I went to the trial to him, but hopefully he's retired now and he's with his family and his grandchildren. But this was one of the defendants at the large trial that really didn't belong on trial. Now, here's this low life I always talk about. Believe it or not, a lot of mob guys, made guys, and associates, they hang out and associate with low lives and do business with them. And this is what happens. Here's Mark Hay, drug addict, thief, burglar, mob guy wannabe. He was part of the crew, and he eventually got pinched on a drug case. Couldn't handle doing a couple years in jail, so decided to cooperate, and actually wore a wire on these guys. He testified that Mike Sarno was the boss of the crew. He testified all about Mark Pman, what his role was. He also wore a wire on Samuel Volpendenzo, the master blaster, where Sammy was bragging about the bomb that he made. He was one of the men in the van that they delivered the bomb. He was also one of the guys that would go on the smash and grabs. Real scumbag, real lowlife, one of the worst I've ever seen, right up there with Junior Calabrese, Nick Calabrese, Lenny Patrick, BJ Jehoda, just as bad, real fucking lowlife. If I was on that jury, I definitely did not find this man credible. There definitely would have been a hung jury. At one point, he testified that they did a home invasion, broad daylight, early afternoon, and a senior citizen couple came home, caught him in the act. The old man was fighting with Marquet and actually getting the best of him. And in order for this guy to break free from the old man, because the old man was whooping his ass, this pussy stabbed him in the leg in order to get away. When Marquet and then the widow testified to that, everybody in that courtroom was disgusted with this man. So from that point on, I didn't believe one word he said. But this is Marquet. He actually wore a wire and helped convict Anthony Volpendenzo and told everything he knew on Mark Pman, the Polish guy, and Mike Sarno. Without his testimony, most of the defendants would have been found not guilty. Obviously, this guy had his living expenses paid. He stayed out of jail. He got weekly payments from the government for his cooperation. And most importantly, kept them alive, kept them safe. But these are the lowlifes that the government uses to go after the bigger fish. Two of the defendants, I'd rather not say their name because the last thing I need is a couple crooked cops from Berwyn or Cicero pulling me over. But there was a corrupt Berwyn cop and a corrupt Cicero cop that were defendants. They obviously did not want to go to jail, so they flipped, cooperated, and testified. And it's amazing how these two scumbags even became police officers. The one guy, what he would do is he would give the burglary crew certain scores to go on. So for example, he would go on a call and pretend he was there on a call, taking a report. But if he noticed there was some valuables in that house, like artwork or jewelry or cash or drugs or guns or whatever it was, he would tip off the Sarno crew, the Mark Pman crew, on what they had, give them the people's habits, knowing the best time to rob it. So then the crew would go ahead and rob that home or rob that business and then give the cops a little kickback. So this was going on. One Cicero and one Berwyn, two mobbed up cops that eventually got caught. And the one Berwyn cop, I'd rather not say his name, Italian guy, but he testified a couple times a year. He would drive down to Florida, I think Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, 24-hour drive with hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, guns, drugs, and he would deliver them to his mobbed up father who was living in Florida. But just to show you the connection again between the police department, Chicago Police Department, Berwyn, Cicero, to the Chicago outfit. The one Berwyn cop also testified that the day the bomb went off, he happened to be in somebody's house on a domestic call, and he heard the bomb, and he said the whole house shook. But he'll never forget hearing the bomb go off that day. I got to admit, the government, the feds had a really good, tight investigation against these guys, man. Uh, here's Lou. This guy's an undercover FBI agent. He did a show on Gary Jenkson's. I seen him testify in court. And Lou befriended Mark Pulchman, which was very hard to do. Mark Pulchman was very paranoid, very cautious, didn't trust nobody. But Lou went into the pawn shop one day and Goldberg Jewelers and had some gold teeth. And that piqued Mark Pulchman's interest. They started talking, and slowly over time, because they had some things in common, like ultimate fighting and working out, they became friends. And believe it or not, Mark Pulchman fell for it. He trusted Lou. And then he found out eventually when the indictment came down, they all got arrested, that Lou was actually an undercover FBI agent. Totally blew Mark Pulchman's mind. We're talking about a high-ranking outlaw motorcycle gang, but he fell for it. Government also, which I thought was interesting, had 2 blonde female FBI agents on this case. And the one agent testified that when she was tailing Sarno, he would drive really slow. Then he'd drive real fast. Then he'd make a U-turn out in the middle of nowhere. He obviously was paranoid and knew somebody was following him. And the agents would get a kick out of it because they were driving him nuts. He knew he was under investigation. He didn't really know why. But it was 2 female FBI agents that brought down the whole crew. They also testified how they were able to break into Goldberg Jewelers and wire up the inside, and how they put a camera and surveillance on the telephone pole in the alley. One day I'll go to that alley and go to the Goldberg Jewelry store right there in Chicago on Roosevelt and Cicero and do a little story there. But 2 FBI agents, female FBI agents, along with Lou, the undercover FBI agents. These were the catalysts that brought down Mike Sarno, Mark Pulchman, and the entire crew. And then you had a top prosecutor here. I've never seen him before. It's kind of weird to see a Muslim prosecutor at Dirksen Federal, but this is Ahmad Abajit. He was a prosecutor during the Sarno trial, and I remember during closing arguments, he pointed his finger and he was yelling at Large, yelling at Mark Pulchman, and Large's family was just giving him real evil stares, like if they could just reach over and grab him. And then I'll never forget during the sentencing from Frankie Schweiss, when they brought Frankie Schweiss in shackles, and he saw Ahmad Bashit, the Arab prosecutor. Frankie Schweiss started yelling out loud, calling them Arabic names, calling them terrorism. You could just imagine the German was too sick to stand trial, the family secret trial. But imagine him with Joey Lombardo, Frank Calabrese, and Jimmy Marcello. I mean, that would have really been something. But when Frank Schweiss saw Ahmad Bashit, the United States prosecutor, being in Arabic, dressed in his turban, he started yelling him, calling him every name in the book. They had to take Frank out of the courtroom. But this guy here, he had a tight case, and the government put all Sarno's crew to jail. Now here's Mike Sarno's a lawyer, one of the top defense attorneys in Chicago, Terence Jeppe. Him and his son are still practicing law today. And back in the day, he was like a mob lawyer. I've seen him represent Betty Lauren Maltese. I've seen him represent Mike Sarno and a couple other outfit guys. Actually lived in the same building with him at 400 East Randolph. We used to drink at the same bar. But he definitely, when Sarno, at the end, when Sarno was found guilty, the judge revoked his bail, felt that he agreed with the prosecutor that Mike Sarno was a flight risk, which is complete bullshit. Sarno wasn't going anywhere, but they took Large into custody immediately. Large's family and Large, I don't think they were surprised by the verdict, but they were definitely surprised that the judge revoked his bond. Large, I'll never forget it. he pulled out a piece of paper and he started to cry a little. And then his lawyer, Terence Jeppe, grabbed the paper from him and read the letter out loud. And then I'll never forget, they took Large out of the courtroom, and his family was yelling, his daughter, his wife, saying it's going to be a real nice Christmas now, because the family thought, that Large would be able to remain on bond until the sentencing. But unfortunately, the Dirksen Federal Building, they don't fuck around. If you're found guilty, 99.9% of the time, the judge is going to take you into custody. But this is Terence Jeppe, a fine attorney, a mob attorney, if you will. I've never seen him actually win a case, but he definitely does a good job attacking the witnesses, and he really tried to discredit Mark Hay and some of the other government witnesses. But at the end, even though the government witnesses are all scumbags and lowlifes, the government does a good job cooperating everything, and eventually they get found guilty. Now here's Alex Salerno. As we know, he represented his father, Bobby Salerno, when they murdered Hal Smith, and very fortunate to get to know Alex Salerno. He also represented Bobby Pinozzo. I met him. I used to see him at the Taylor Street Fest along with his son. Unfortunately, Alex died while his father, Bobby, was away. And Alex would come into the Mike Sarno trial and just sit in on the trial, because he was very close to Salernos are very close to the Sarnos till this day. But I remember seeing Alex attend, not every day, but most days of the Mike Sarno trial. But God bless Alex Salerno. Hopefully he's in heaven with his father. Now here's Large's attorney. No, not Large's attorney. Mark Polkman's attorney here. A young, fine attorney, Damien Charles. I seen him represent Anthony Chuan Doyle. Chuan would not listen to him, and his attorneys decided to take the stand in his own defense. And Mitch Mars destroyed Anthony Chuan on direct. But this guy is an upcoming lawyer. If you ever get in trouble, this is the guy you want to call. He represented Mark Polkman, and he asked me one day, what do you think? How do you think the trial's going? And I said, hey, no offense, it seems to me, but the prosecutors seem like they're a little bit sharper, more savvy, more well-prepared. He said, no, Jimmy. He's like, we all went to the same law schools. They have all the evidence. And he's absolutely right. All the evidence in this case was against his defendant, Mark Polkman, high-ranking outlaw motorcycle gang. I told him that one time, though, during some of the testimony, one of the jurors was sound asleep, during what I thought was an important testimony, and he kind of brushed it off, basically saying that that's no surprise that juries nod off during trial. But if I was a defendant and one of the juries was sleeping, I would definitely bring it up. Also here's his co-counsel here. They represented this scumbag Harvey Weinstein. I've also seen her sitting in a few trials as well. Family Secrets trial, Mike Sarno trial. She's a top defense attorney as well. And then last but not least, we got the judge, Ronald Guzman. He kind of played it cool with Sarno, allowing Mike, a guy like Mike, with his record out. He allowed him out on bond. He allowed Mike Sarno to go to Joe's Steak and Seafood restaurant right before Christmas with his family. But unfortunately, like most federal judges, they're pro-prosecutors. They allow a lot of evidence against Large that the jury probably should have never have heard, like maybe his reputation and other crimes he's committed and his association with organized crime. And then there's a lot of things that the judge doesn't allow in that would help the defendant. So it's really not fair sometimes. It's really not a level playing field, if you will. But really sad, like I said, when Large was found guilty, I don't think his family and friends were surprised. But when they took him into custody, because the judge agreed with the prosecutor, Large was a flight risk, that got a little deep, because then you saw Large break down, start crying. His wife and daughter were yelling at the judge and prosecutor in the courtroom. And eventually they led Large away. But here's Ronald Guzman, federal judge. He presided, and these guys have no empathy towards mob guys or their families. That's quite obvious. And in the end, like all trials, pretty much every single one of them, all the defendants are found guilty. Mike Sarno received 25 years in prison for the bombing. Anthony Volpendenzel for making the bomb received 37 years. He was 87 years old at the time. It was like a life sentence. His son got 12 years and pleaded with the judge that in all the robberies he did, not one person ever got hurt, and that should, the judge should take that in consideration, but he never did. The Polish guy got 3 years. Mark Poltman got 60 years. Remember, I said all the evidence against was him, and Mark Poltman was actually shocked that he got 60 years. Again, in his mind, he didn't kill anybody. He didn't hurt anybody. He did not sell drugs. He did not sell guns. He felt 60 years was way too harsh. Eventually, though, with his good lawyer, he got it knocked down. With his good lawyer, Damien Charles, Mark Poltman got it down to 20 years. But let's hope that Mike Sarno can come home one day to his family. He's trying to get out on compassionate release. There's no reason this man should still be in prison. I think most of us will agree. And again, if you really dig a deeper, deeper into the Mike Sarno trial, there wasn't a whole lot of evidence against Mike Sarno. The motive was there to blow up the competitor building in Berwyn, but other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of linking large to the crew. Hope you enjoyed this story. I also did another story a couple months ago on the Sarno trial. You could check out in my other YouTube videos. If you like my Chicago mob trials, hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. I appreciate everything. And now I am going to share something with you to end this, which would be, bear with me here.
Sarno is only 62 years old, but he is obese and an extremely put last month. Sarno filed for court-ordered compassionate release from prison, saying his condition puts him at grave risk for COVID-19 if he remains in custody. Tonight, a Chicago judge has agreed with prosecutors. Sarno deserves no mercy.
About 10 years ago, when he was sentenced to 25 years in prison, we were extremely devastated and hurt, but now they are pushing a life sentence on him because, unfortunately, I don't think he'll make it out after this.
Mike Sarno is doing time for his role in a gambling and robbery alliance between the Outfit and the Outlaws biker gang. While his days as a heavy hitter in the mob may have ended a decade ago, his weight that prompted nicknames Fat Boy and later the Large Guy has stayed with him, spelled out in court motions for his release and also in government replies downplaying his obesity even in the COVID era.
They don't believe that he's sick, despite the fact that there were 2 medical opinions provided by 2 separate doctors stating that my client, Mr. Sarno, should be released from prison.
District Judge Ronald Guzman didn't buy it and ruled against Sarno's release, a decision that Sarno's attorney says will be appealed, while the ailing mob figure remains in a private hospital rehab unit under round-the-clock guard, according to his lawyer.
The government's response to this was heartless, it was disingenuous, and it was ignorant to the facts of Mr. Sarno's medical condition.
It just hits hard. I mean, his obesity is not the factor at this point. It's his everything that's wrong with him. I just told him that he has to stay strong and he can't let his medical conditions take over because he needs to come home and see his granddaughter and his family, his wife, and friends. I said, please promise me that you'll make it out healthy. So with the government's help, I hope that they'll help us.
If Sarno's attorney can't eventually win release in court, he is lining up another option, planning to ask President Trump for clemency on the grounds that the compassionate release law is not being applied fairly in Sarno's case when other more dangerous criminals, including Chicago mobsters, have been freed. We asked the U.S. Attorney in Chicago about these developments. They declined to weigh in.
Hey, if you like that video,
Well, let's hope and pray that Mike Sarno can come home to his family one day. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Coming up in November, I got another rat of the month. We're going to talk about BJ Jehoda, Blowjob Jehoda. He was an associate with the Rocky Infelice crew. Decided to flip, cooperate, and wear a wire. And he testified against Rocky Infelice, Sally De Laurentiis, Louis Marino, Bobby Bellavia, and others, sending them all to prison while he vacationed down in Mexico. That's the next wrap. Hope everybody has a good weekend and happy Halloween.